Good evening, everyone. I hope you all are well. Thanks for being with us tonight as we wrap up the 2020-21 NBLSA term. Extremely grateful for you all being with us this evening. I'm excited for this panel that we have today, working with Intuit, our partner, who's been nice enough to lend some of their finest to be with us today to talk about their experience and their careers as in-house counsel. So in advance of getting that started as quickly as possible, I'm going to go through some brief introductions and then allow each of our panelists to tell us a bit more about themselves, and then we'll field some pre-scripted questions. Again, if you have any questions that you would like to be answered, feel free to send them to me directly and I'll do my best to get them in throughout the course of the night. So again, thank you all for being with us. To start, we have Priya Brandes, who's with us. She's a senior corporate counsel at Intuit, and I will allow Priya to tell us a bit more about herself and her experience at Intuit thus far.
All right. Hi, everyone. Glad to be here. So I'm Priya. I'm now work in corporate securities, mergers and acquisitions at Intuit. And prior to serving in this capacity, I was a products counsel. So pretty much reviewed all of our QuickBooks products and before they went to launch and went to market. And I work closely with other members of our team, all of which are on the call. I've been at Intuit for about 2.5 years now. Before that, I was at Verizon, also as a products counsel. And then prior to that, I did worked for law firms and the county government in litigation primarily, and also regulatory. So glad to be here.
Thank you, Priya. Next, we have Pamela Onyekaba, who is a corporate counsel at Intuit as well, and their transactions and marketing group.
Thank you, Jalen. I'm so happy to be here. Glad to see all of you all. And a little bit about myself. I've been at Intuit now for almost 2 years in our transactions and marketing group. And so I work on a variety of different contracts, both expense and revenue generating throughout the different business units. I also help our different marketing teams review marketing content, help draft disclaimers, and things of that nature. And then also work on a few mergers and acquisition matters as well. And it's been a great journey being here at Intuit, and I'm really happy to be on this panel and share a bit of my experience with you all.
Thank you, Pamela. Next, we have Akasha Perez, who's a member of Intuit's Ethics and Investigations Group.
Hello, and thank you for the introduction. My name is Akasha, and I've been at Intuit for almost 2 years. Before this, I'm in the Ethics and Investigations Group, where I work on high-risk investigations. These are mostly investigations related to Title VII, so discrimination, retaliation, harassment, that kind of thing. And then I also get to work on developing our response to social, economic, and political issues that impact our employees. Before this, I worked at Tesla doing similar work, and before that, I did employment litigation at Oric. Oh, and I graduated from Howard University School of Law. I don't know if we have any bison in the room.
I'm sure we will have some. Next, we have LeVale Simpson, who is a partner, who's also part of the ethics and investigations team at Intuit.
Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. Had a little issue with the mute button. I'm LeVale. I'm also with the Ethics and Investigations team and responsible for conducting investigations into protected categories, as Akasha explained earlier. And so, again, that includes issues related to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, sexual harassment policy issues. And so our investigations run the gamut. Prior to joining Intuit, and I've been with Intuit for about 2 years now as well. And prior to joining Intuit, I was also at Tesla with Akasha. We became fast friends there, and here we are working together at Intuit again. So very happy about that. And prior to joining Tesla, I was at the University of California Office of the President, and I worked there conducting whistleblower investigations and whistleblower retaliation investigations as well. So all in all, I've been investigating for about 7 years now. And I'm just very happy to be here and look forward to sharing some more with you all. And in terms of school, I went to the University of Miami in Florida. So go Canes. And I graduated from UC Davis undergrad. So.
Thank you, LeVale. And last but not least, we have Juliette Stancil, who is currently a privacy counsel with Intuit.
Thank you for the introduction. Hi, my name is Juliette. I am a privacy counsel for Intuit. I've been with the company about a year and a half. So of the was on this panel, I'm probably the least tenured at the company. But prior to that, I was in-house at a medical device company, doing primarily transactions work, but also building out their global compliance and ethics program around fraud, waste, and abuse in the healthcare system. The majority of my professional career was spent in healthcare, serving in both as a compliance and privacy officer, as well as counsel, conducting transactions, and things of that nature. Primarily now at Intuit, I advise the company around our data protection and data use ethics issues as it relates to customer and employee data. And I went to undergrad at UNC, Chapel Hill, go Heels, and went to law school at the University of Arkansas, Little Rock, and got an LLM in health law at Loyola Chicago.
Thank you, Juliette. This will be posed to all, and we can start with Pamela. Can you tell us, you all have worked at some very interesting and prestigious places prior to coming to Intuit, so you can tell us a bit about why you chose to be an in-house lawyer. We can go Pamela, LeVale, Juliette, Akasha, and then to Priya.
Yeah, I know that I didn't really give a lot of background before Intuit. So before joining Intuit, I was at Wells Fargo, and I worked in the wholesale banking division, working on some Dodd-Frank compliance matters. And that was a really interesting role because I worked with a small team of lawyers, and what we helped the sales team do is make sure that they have KYC and other types of matters properly documented with our institutional clients, and also some risk mitigation work as well. And I think for me, given my journey out of law school, so I graduated from Vanderbilt in 2015, and then during my third year, I was looking for a job and I was trying to figure out where I wanted to work and what kind of capacity I wanted to work in. And there was an opportunity to do a fellowship out west with the Lawyers Committee of Civil Rights of the San Francisco Bay Area. And I was lucky enough to get that opportunity. And within that 1 year, I worked in a couple different groups. I worked in a capacity as a asylum coordinator for really the bedrock program of that nonprofit, where we would help refugees prepare for and actually go through some of their hearings to try to gain residence here through that program. And then I also worked on a couple different more like litigation preparation matters and that kind of thing. And the rotation that really stuck with me as far as helping me understand kind of where I wanted to see myself grow as a lawyer was with our small group that helped provide consultations to business owners and entrepreneurs on business matters. And so helping individuals understand sort of, you know, what do they have to do to start a nonprofit, or what are some of the requirements as far as like getting certain business licenses or that kind of thing. And I realized really quickly that I enjoyed working with businesses. I liked drafting and negotiating contracts more than going to court. And from there, I was really positioned on how can I leverage my experience in this area as far as you know, contracts and that kind of thing, and business related matters into my next position. As kind of additional background, before going to law school, I was at the Minnesota Attorney General's office for 3 years in the capacity as a consumer analyst. And so people who had different kind of complaints would call in, and you know, they might have had an issue with, say they bought a car, it was a lemon, or they're getting robocalls or what have you. And in that role, it was a lot of communication with the business, right? Or if they're in foreclosure, how can we help them manage their payments or refinance or something along those lines. And there was a lot of great communication back and forth on behalf of the consumer, right? And try to figure out kind of a middle ground. And so kind of getting that experience as far as, you know, all the different areas that lawyers play critical roles in business, and then being able to find a position within banking specifically that was more transactional in nature and you know, drafting, negotiating, working with the business closely, helping them achieve their goals, and of course helping guide them through the matrix of regulations and laws that apply to that industry. I knew I wanted to stay in that kind of capacity as a close business partner. And when the opportunity came for me to look outside of Wells Fargo for like my next leap, I was looking at like fintech companies, and Intuit was really appealing to me, just given the breadth of matters I would work on and the options to really help our business develop and launch these products that we have right now. So that's kind of a bit of my journey as far as why I intentionally chosen to stay in these more in-house roles.
LeVale.
And so I had a bit of a non-traditional path to this in-house role. I actually started my career as an insurance defense litigator at a small firm in Miami, or mid-sized firm in Miami, Florida. And throughout that litigation path, though, the piece that I enjoyed the most, like I enjoyed going to court, and I also enjoyed kind of the investigations piece of my cases, like understanding, you know, what happened in a given, like one of the things that I worked on a lot of was mostly car accidents. And so we would defend folks who we hire by insurance companies to defend people who would be, you know, regular people in these pretty serious car accidents and accidents that would happen that, you know, I would just say I've seen some gruesome things is what I'm trying to get at. And so we'd be hired to do that, and it would be my job to kind of piece together, you know, what happened and what are the damages, et cetera. And so that was what my partner relied on me for a lot. And so I had a lot of investigations experience working at the firm. But the thing that I really wasn't that interested in, and I found this out quickly, was billing hours. And so as I learned that that wasn't what I wanted to do, I got a little more interested in going in-house and finding a role that might be suitable. And so long story short, I ended up at the University of California, and I had the opportunity to begin investigating, and it started with their Title IX cases. And so these are cases related to generally it's sexual assault, sexual harassment, and that was pretty much where I started. I cut my teeth there in those types of investigations, and it's just, you know, as you might imagine, handling those types of cases is pretty heavy, and you know, requires a lot of patience, a lot of empathy, and just that's, you know, kind of how I got into that area. How I ended up at Intuit was that one of the things that I learned is that in order to do this work and do it in a meaningful way, you want to make sure that you are, you know, pushing an organization forward, and that you're not continuing to see just like repeat types of cases, because it gets harder to do this type of work if you feel like you're not actually moving the needle. And so one of the things that excited me about Intuit was that I felt like the program there was something where they were really interested in cultural changes and making sure that we have, you know, what we refer to as our safe, ethical, and inclusive work environment. And I felt like that was something that was genuine, and that I could really add a lot there. And that, again, my work wouldn't be just reactive work, but it'd be proactive work that would actually move the needle. And so that's how I ended up here, and that's you know, what makes me very happy and keeps me going each day with this work.
My career journey, you know, when I graduated undergrad, I honestly didn't know what I wanted to do. I was thinking about whether to get an MBA or a JD, and ultimately landed on a JD, but quite frankly, did not enjoy my law school experience at all. And so when I started thinking about alternatives to, practicing criminal defense or, being a litigator and things of that nature, I really gravitated toward the healthcare space. They, generally have like a mission that I can that I can really get behind and align with. And then, not being a care provider, I didn't have to worry about seeing blood and the more gruesome things. And so I thought it was a way that I could contribute to, to the good, right? But in a way that didn't require me to really be a formal healthcare provider. And so my first role was as a compliance officer for a small rural health system in Wyoming. And as a compliance officer, having a law degree and legal expertise is always, really a plus, but it wasn't really where I saw myself making the biggest impact. And so I did that for a while and then transitioned over to the in-house counsel role where I felt like I could have more of a impact in making some of the systemic changes that I felt like were necessary from all the things I was auditing and seeing on the back end. And I really loved healthcare, and I did it for about 7 years, and then I got the 7 year itch in my career, and had to make a decision on whether I wanted to just go deeper into healthcare, or if I wanted to pivot. And I really wanted to focus more on the world of data privacy. There are just a lot of really interesting issues that come up in that world, and in a lot of ways, it is it's an area of law that's burgeoning, and you get to really play an active role in it. And so I had the opportunity to join Intuit as privacy counsel, and really have enjoyed having the ability to support our business's mission, and see an organization really make changes that are beneficial and that have a great impact on everyday people. And so for me, it's, the in-house world is all I've ever known, and I do not regret it because I too do not want any billable hours. Um, so
Yeah, my journey to in-house. So I went right after law school straight into a firm because I didn't know what I was doing, and it sounded like that's what everybody else was doing. So that's what I did. To give you a little background on how I got there, before law school, I was a union organizer and a representative for several years. I did about 4 years of organizing, a couple of years of representational work. So I knew I wanted to do employment law or labor law or something in that realm. Went to law school and then realized that most firms aren't doing like plaintiff side employment and labor work. Most of the big firms are doing defense work. And so I was like, well, that's probably a good idea. So that's what I'm going to do. So moved back to California and did that and spent 2 years there, and just was not a good fit for me. I didn't find it to allow me to be creative in my work like I like to be. And also, when you're in a defense firm, you're constantly, it's just reactive work. You're, reacting to whatever comes in. It's not proactive at all, right? Most employers kind of want to do their own thing, and then they pull in the firms when they have like some big problem. And so I recognized after 2 years working there, like, well, I want to do something that's proactive because I want to make a difference in people's lives. Because if I'm sitting here miserable at work, guaranteed tons of people are sitting around miserable at work. What can we do to help that? And so that just felt like a better fit. And then the other piece was, if you're going to do litigation, you kind of have to like a long haul, like the cases just last forever, right? And so I didn't find it personally satisfying, again, because it wasn't exciting for me to like sit and respond to interrogatories and do a bunch of discovery and sit by myself all day in a room and draft memos and briefs and stuff. So I knew I wanted to do something different. I found a role at Tesla that aligned with my previous experience, and it kind of combined. It was like a perfect marriage of kind of like doing union organizing and investigations in that space, and then doing employment litigation on the defense side coming together. Got a great role there. Met LeVale, which was awesome and totally helped me see that this was a career that I could really make for myself. And then when he left to Intuit, he called me up and was like, this is the real deal. And I was like, done. I needed to hear no more. We're done. So that's how I ended up at Intuit. And what he was saying about the program is absolutely right. Like the piece that I felt was missing from my career was the creative piece, the proactive piece, knowing that I was going somewhere, waking up every day, excited about the work, and that it's very different day to day, keeps me here. So in a nutshell, that's how I left the firm that I thought I was supposed to be at and ended up here at Intuit where I'm supposed to be at.
So I think, Akasha, a lot of that resonates with me.
Thank you.
I had a pretty unconventional, non-traditional route as well. So I was a psychology major in undergrad and started working for the courts to really address bias in language translation and jury trials, and then also to work on reunification for foster kids. And so through that, kind of started interning at various public defender offices, and so went to law school actually for criminal law and practiced criminal law, you know, as kind of like throughout every internship that I could get in law school, and then didn't speak Spanish. So when it came time for a job in a public defender's office in California, it was a really tough sell because I couldn't speak Spanish, even though I had been in the criminal law space for probably, with various internships, for probably like 5 years. So at that point, I had probably worked on and supported about 3 different trials. And so I was trying to find a way to kind of make a pivot, and also graduated kind of from law school at an inopportune time where there weren't as many jobs. And so ended up going to a civil boutique practice in San Francisco that was very multiracial, and it was divided politically. And so I thought it was a really good fit from that perspective. And I ended up, you know, having kind of my own caseload and doing litigation. And the benefit of being at a small boutique firm is that, you know, you do the interrogatories, but you also get to appear in court and really like manage the client relationship. So that was something that I really enjoyed, and was there until the firm dissolved, and then kind of started to reevaluate my career and like where I had energy. And really, I think when I did enjoy litigation, I enjoyed appearing in court, but what I didn't love was that when, even if you're successful and have the like perfect outcome for your clients, they still did have to go through years of litigation and were generally unhappy. And so, you know, when I kind of self-reflected, I decided that I wanted to do something that was collaborative and constructive and really trying to like make the world a better place. And so started to really target kind of where I could go in-house, what types of roles I could do, and how to make that transition. And so at first I went and explored the world of government, and I worked as a county counsel for about a year, working on health and human services issues, animal services issues, and really enjoyed that because you were directly like providing advice and really like shaping policy. And that was something that resonated with me. But again, it's, you know, it's a harder market to kind of like get into. And so ultimately really enjoyed a lot of the privacy aspects of that work. And that led me to, and then I did some telecom regulatory work on fire safety proceedings, and also things that were kind of, you know, private in nature, but had a lot of public components to it. And then that led me to a job at Verizon where I was focused on smart city technology and like trying to be a steward of data while advancing smart city technology. And that was really interesting, but kind of like, as everyone said, in terms of Intuit, the chief privacy officer, former chief privacy officer for Intuit, was my former boss at Verizon. And so when he left Verizon, he was someone who was a great mentor to me, and he asked me to come with him. And so that was the reason for the change and the move. And I think for Intuit, it's really, you know, my parents both had like an architectural practice together. They had a small business. And so when I looked at the products and tried to kind of align my values to the corporate world, it was a little bit easier for me to do that with Intuit because of that connection and that tie to the small business.
Thank you. We'll go in reverse order this time. So we'll start with Priya, Juliette, Akasha, Pamela, then LeVale. Can you tell us a bit, you all kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you tell us more about your day-to-day, what's the day-to-day life as, you know, an in-house lawyer, and kind of how it varied from some of your previous experience?
Sure. I think I'm happy to start. So my day-to-day life has, I guess, changed depending on the hat that I've worn at Intuit. But I think that the common unifying theme is that, you know, in the pandemic or not in the pandemic, you kind of go to work, you check your emails, right? It's very routine, and then see what's on the docket for that day. You align it with kind of the business strategy in terms of saying, like, where am I going to, you know, have the most impact? Where should I focus my efforts today? And then a lot of the time, and I think this is where it differs from law firms, a lot of the time you spend in meetings. So you have quite a few meetings with key stakeholders on, you know, on the variety of work that you end up supporting. And then you kind of, I would say, end the day, and then it's time to kind of go through your inbox and then focus on some of the other core work that you do. But a lot of the, I would say a lot of the day is spent in meetings, interacting with people, talking about strategy, brainstorming in terms of how to work together, how to advance kind of the ultimate objectives of the company. And then, you know, and really collaborating.
Yeah, yes, lots of meetings. I don't think I had a true appreciation for how much time we spend in meetings until I became in-house, and I was like, how am I supposed to get regular work done? But as it relates to like the kind of core work that me and my team focus on, we provide, we have a lot of work as it relates to just our data use practices. So a lot of times we collaborate in partnership with folks on our product legal team to review the product experience, to make sure we're providing our customers the right opportunities to like opt in or opt out, or provide notice around how we're going to collect their data, what we're going to use it for. We have operations outside of the US, so we support teams in Canada, in the UK, and France, Australia, Brazil, Mexico, and I think those are it. And then, so we spend a lot of times, like, understanding the data protection requirements in those areas, and, advising the business on how to build out a product experience that complies with those requirements. Here in the US, we spend a lot of time around our CCPA requirements. That's, the state law in California that provides individuals with certain rights to their data, including the ability to access it or ask that a company delete it. We do a lot around AI and working with our engineering and data scientists around, ethical use of information that goes into, machine learning models and things of that nature, explainability in AI. And so even though I'm not a technical person, I learn a lot about technology and system limitations and applications through that work. And then we also have portion of our team that's devoted to, just building out our program, so education and training, and then our incident response process. So, if we were to get a report of a potential, unauthorized access to data, we spin up a process where we review the facts and make determinations on whether or not we need to notify the individual or an appropriate regulatory authority. So we get to work with literally probably every area of the business, because every area of the business handles either customer or employee data in some way. And it's a really kind of it's always really interesting, because a lot of what we do, especially outside of really stringent legal requirements, is around thinking creatively and understanding the business case for what they want to do and how they want to do it, and then being thought partners with them as well.
In ethics and investigations, I think like half of my time is probably spent doing investigations. And so if somebody raises a concern, we go talk to that person, figure out what happened, and then talk to whoever else is involved to figure out best, more likely than not, what happened there and whether there was a policy violation or whether there needs to be some other, way to address it, right? So it could be anything. Could be, the policy wasn't clear and we need to address that. Could be they didn't know the policy in the first place. We need to, make sure that we're letting people know what's up. So that's like half of it. And then the other half, I think of it a lot of the times like an issue spotting exam, kind of like torts or something, where you're trying to pick out like what's wrong. Usually parts of the business coming to us saying, we want to do this, or we have done this. Is there anything wrong with it? Or how can we best communicate this? And that's the part of the job that I love the best. It's just, every day is a little bit different. I got to drive a work stream this year on addressing social, economic, and political issues. And so it was kind of like a brainstorm sesh once a week about, what's going on in the world? How does it impact our employees? What can we do to address it? So I'm sure that you've seen there's been a couple of social, economic, and political issues that have popped up this year. So lots of on the ground thinking and tons of collaboration with other groups.
Sorry, I'm sorry. And so, yeah, without repeating too much of what Akasha just mentioned, since we're on the same team and have very similar experiences, I'll just focus a little bit more on the investigations piece, which is actually my favorite part of our work. Like, I love the proactive work and making sure that we are, doing the right thing and that we are proceeding in an ethical way. And it's awesome to do that across the company. All of the businesses within Intuit are different. You're talking about TurboTax versus QuickBooks versus Mint. All of these things are different with different people and different expectations around the business. So that's always a great thing. But one of the things that, again, is most fun to me is investigations and trying to understand, what more likely than not occurred in a given situation. That's the standard that we use. And so, of course, it's not like a criminal trial that so we don't use a criminal standard. We don't use beyond a reasonable doubt. We're just looking at essentially 50% plus one. So what more likely than not occurred in a situation, and then piecing together what's our recommendation on what do we do next. And a lot of times we get all kinds of very interesting, cases. And concerns that people raise. I'm responsible for investigations in our Sydney office, and so I spend a pretty significant amount of time working with our folks in Australia, in Sydney, Australia, as well as the cases that we just have at our locations throughout the U.S. And so that's been a blast. And so I would just say each day is just very different. There are a lot of times where I set out and I have my schedule outlined and I try to be as organized as possible. And I think that the day is going to go a particular way. And it just does not go that way because there's some fire that needs to be put out. As I guess frustrating as that can be sometimes, especially when you're up against a deadline on something else, or you're just, trying to get things moved. And it's also just an awesome experience to, make sure that, I don't know, it just feels like you're just constantly moving and shaking and making sure that you're just kind of across all of these different things. And so, yeah, every day is just different. Trying to keep the email inbox clear, monitoring Slack, and just always constantly getting hit up and for bits of information. So it's just a very interesting environment. I think that a lot of my other past roles, I was a lot more defined, where it was just very, this is what you do, this is your lane. And I think here at Intuit, in this particular role, just wear a lot of different hats. And I think that that's probably true for everyone here on the panel, even though we're in different departments and different roles. It's very much a kind of a team effort. You just pick up the slack where you can, and you sometimes play outside of your swim lane because that's just the right thing to do. So I'll pass it to Pamela.
Yeah, I totally agree with what everyone has said so far. Lots of meetings and meetings with different kinds of groups of people. So I might have like an internal team meeting Just within my transactions and marketing group, I might have meetings with our privacy folks, someone on our products team, or in other types of roles, and then also with the business. And so, every day, again, it varies on kind of what's highest priority. And I think the prioritization of our work is something that we have to really get good at and always kind of calibrate depending on what's happening in the business, and making sure that we're responsive to the most high priority needs that the different teams we support have. So I work on our payments and money movement, kind of banking products and services, and then also with right now our omni-channel commerce offering, which is pretty new. We call it QuickBooks Commerce, and that helps product-based businesses better sell and manage their inventory and that kind of thing. And so this is a totally new space for me, I think, and better understanding the business strategy around that, understanding sort of the long-term goals, and then supporting the partnerships on that has been a really amazing blast for me now. So one day I could be figuring out the best template to start working on an agreement for, say, a partner, or we could be mid-negotiation, get on the call with the other partners, business and legal teams, iron out comments that have gone back and forth, maybe 1 or 2 rounds at that point, kind of figure out next steps, or work with the marketing groups and review promotional videos and that kind of thing. So it's a lot of email management, Slack management, and then also managing your own personal to-do lists.
Thank you. Akasha, can you tell us a bit about how different being an in-house attorney is than from a traditional big law role? So in terms of, are you working on similar type of tasks? How do you feel, is the career trajectory different? Does it operate in a different way? Does in-house opportunities tend to be more diverse overall? And then to speak a bit about your work-life balance. Is it the same? Is it not real? Can you tell us more about that?
Whew, that's a loaded one. Let's see. Let's start with work-life balance. Work-life balance is much, much better for me. And I'll say that to say I think everybody's experience at firms are different, and it depends where you are and what kind of firm you're at, what practice group you're in, and what the expectations look like. But for me, I like to spend my weekends doing things that I like to do, and this career has provided much more of that for me. There's much more separation, because when there's an emergency in-house, typically you call your outside counsel, right? That's what we do. So for me, being in-house provides a lot more flexibility in that way. I'll also say the reason why I think it's different is because the leadership structure is more flat. So it's not as hierarchical, right? When you're in a firm, kind of the partners go out and get the cases, and then that trickles down to senior associates, and that trickles down to managing associates, and then that trickles down to associates. Here, it's kind of a little bit more flat. There's usually less levels of hierarchy within each practice group or practice area. And so I enjoy, being able to be a little bit closer to the strategy and do some of the thinking about how to do the work rather than just being assigned tasks. I get more visibility into overall strategy and direction, and have a little bit more control about how my work gets done. So that I enjoy a lot. Day to day, totally different. The balance for me feels a little bit easier to maintain. I would find myself sometimes, staying at the office, of course, as a first and second year associate, very late hours, and I was always by myself. And for someone like me who enjoys, being social, talking and whatnot, I didn't enjoy being behind a computer, in an office with my door shut 8 to 10 hours a day, and then going home and having to do it again at home for a few hours. So I enjoy all the meetings. And I think that provides also just a little bit of a break in your day, right? You can kind of go from drafting a document, doing something really serious like an investigation, and then jump into a meeting where you're talking about something completely different, and then jump into an interview where you're interviewing an intern, and then go and talk to somebody about the internship program. And so your day just kind of bounces around from thing to thing, which provides a little mental breaks that I find necessary in the day. Did I answer your question?
No, you did. That was perfect.
Okay.
Pamela, can you tell us, for those students who may be interested in a career as an in-house lawyer, what are some things that employers are looking for when they're bringing in people, whether they come from big law, whether they come from public interest, whether they're coming from government? What are some skills that are sought after?
Yeah, I would say definitely you have to be a self-starter and you can't be afraid to ask questions and go get the answer. That's definitely probably one of the top skills I would say. And a lot of what we do, it could be kind of an instance of first impression. So we have to actively figure out, how do we handle this new approach to say, a partnership, or how are we going to think about a certain type of policy that we're looking to implement. And a lot of times we have assistance from outside counsel in thinking through those things, but we also have to have that skill set in-house as well. And so being able to take that initiative and proactively be a really good business partner, I think it would also be helpful, especially in a more transactional role. Even though I did not work in big law after law school, I do see the value in that. I think in getting those skills down, for example, and there's another question that we might talk about as far as classes to take in law school, but having really solid skills in the area that you will support in-house, I think is really critical as well, because there may not be a huge opportunity for training. And so part of being an in-house lawyer, especially in a commercial capacity, is being able to teach yourself and ask the questions where you need to ask questions, but to have that initiative and that experience, I think, and whatever subject matter, right? So if you're working on, say, I don't know, a privacy area or so, and you may have had that experience in your previous role, that's definitely going to be there, right? And a lot of us that, we obviously work amongst each other in the legal department, we know who may have worked elsewhere where they may have gained certain skills that even if they're not working in the same capacity here, like you still bring that experience to bear in your new role in some way or at Intuit. So I think, highlighting and figuring out what type of skills for that particular industry also would be helpful for you to highlight, and then making sure that you've had that experience either in law school through internships or even self-study. If you want to go get certain certifications that might be more attractive to your employer in that area, that business area, I think that would also be really helpful.
Thank you. Priya, can you tell us some about your past experience? You have some varied experience prior to coming to Intuit. And what are there any things from your past life that you've drawn that have been really helpful in your current role? Can you tell us a bit about how your past experience, you still build on that and able to use that in your current role?
Yeah, so I think it's everything helps, right? Like I think that when I graduated from law school, I was worried that I would be pigeonholed. And so I tried to get all these different pieces of experience, even when I was kind of, for example, doing regulatory work, I would go around and ask partners, hey, do you have, are you working on any terms of service or privacy statements that I can kind of get my hands on and help support? And so I think, leading with curiosity for me has really been an important skill set. It's important for litigation because then you can really understand, the end-to-end aspects of the case, kind of what, like what we were talking about with investigations, right? And then you can present that to, a court or to your boss or to the client. And so really kind of leveraging, I would say, the curiosity to really understand and unpack the subject matter, as well as kind of attention to detail and just bringing the drive and just the interest has really been impactful for me, as well as kind of really bringing that communication style, whether it's communicating and writing or speaking to Intuit was really important. So for example, in the products role, I would use a lot of the litigation kind of issue spotting techniques to say, okay, we're going to launch this product, as kind of Juliette was describing. like what are the privacy issues? Okay, now I need to go talk to Juliette. What are the marketing issues? Okay, now I need to go talk to Pamela. And I'm really kind of collaborating with a broader team. And then also when we have, when you're going to recommend something to the business that they don't really want to hear because it'll delay their timeline or, it'll impact kind of the product experience, doing so in a way that is like an advocate to get them to kind of buy into that vision, to really understand it, is really important. And so now that I'm more on the corporate side of the business, it's still so important to communicate for impact, because you are working with a lot of the executives and leaders at the company. And so you want to make sure that you are in the room, you have a presence, you command the room, and that you're able to kind of communicate to meet the best objectives of the company. And I think that's a skill that at least I know I always can continue to work on, but it's definitely a skill that I started really developing in the courtroom.
Thank you, Priya. LeVale, can you tell us, are there any practice areas or classes that you think are helpful for students to take who may be thinking about an in-house role? It can also be externship opportunities, internships opportunity. Is there anything that you think would really set someone up well, or at least give them a good sense of the life of an in-house lawyer?
Yeah, so it really depends on what area you're going to be interested in and what company you want to work at. Of course, like what direction you want to go. For example, in our role, ethics and investigations, we're very much it's a employment law related role. So of course, any sort of the employment classes, labor law, any of those type related classes are going to be important. Anything, we have a lot of issues that are related to essentially Title VII. So, con law is important. Any kind of like critical race theory classes, classes that are going to have like some sort of social or sociology backing. I think all of those are important. So at the end of the day, I mean, we're in Akasha and I, we're in people and places. And so that's the role that we serve, even though we, wear the legal hats as well. And so what's most important is just anything that's going to give you exposure to people and different thoughts, and being able to have an open mind and consider different perspectives and do it with, as I always say, a heavy dose of empathy. That's what I think has been most useful for me. And so throughout my law school career, I just took a lot of classes that were related to people and the law, and how that would how that impacts folks, how the law impacts people from a historical standpoint, or whether it's even family law. So that's what I would recommend, is just whatever you can do to learn more about people from like a social standpoint, historical standpoint, and learn about different types of people, and particularly the experience that they've had in this country and how they've been impacted by the law. And I think that just gives you a breadth that would be awesome if you're interested in employment law. Now, of course, if you want to do something more like copyright, trademarks, like things that are a little more technical in nature, then yes, you definitely need to go there. But I'm gonna stay away from that, and I'm not gonna talk about stuff I don't know nothing about.
Thanks, LeVale. Julia, a more technical question. I know you spend most of your time in-house. Do you have an opinion as to whether a transactional or litigation background is more helpful in the privacy space? Does it not really matter too much? Just your thoughts on that.
So within my team, everyone, I don't think anyone has a litigation background. Most folks, there's someone who came from the world of consulting, and most people actually, kind of started their careers in some capacity in-house, and doing transactions related work before moving over to the privacy side of things. And so I would say, the experience you get as a litigator is obviously, really critical and really core to a lot of work. In the privacy space, I think what matters are all of those things, honestly, that LaVale mentioned, which is like, being able to think creatively, understanding how to like handle and manage varying personalities, not kind of falling for, I do this to myself a lot, but kind of putting yourself in a place where you don't believe, like you're asking the wrong questions, or that you start to question your own confidence and your own subject matter expertise. And so what I think is more critical is like the business acumen, being able to communicate with the folks who are making the decisions around risk, around product experiences, around, strategy, and understanding what those goals are. I think those are really critical. You probably can, like I said, learn those skills as a litigator, but I think it really helps in a transactions experience to be able to understand a lot of those business use cases and be able to speak the lingo so that they resonate with those who are making the decision.
Thank you. Pamela and Akasha, as you think back to your 1L, 2L, 3L year of law school, and even right after law school, what are some advice that you wish someone had told you that you want to share with our audience that kind of would have helped you as you navigated your career and as you look back to where you are now, something that would have been helpful? We can start with Priya.
So one piece of advice I would say is don't compare yourself to others. Everyone has their own journey, and I think especially 1L year, first semester, everyone is kind of like in this, bubble of, competition and comparison and wanting to be first. And, it's that bear analogy, right? Like you don't have to necessarily be first, but you don't want to be last. And there's just a lot of factors that I think might come into play for a lot of people that could make them question, do I belong here? Will I be a good lawyer? Will I find a job? Will I be happy? All these things. And I think just remember that there's light on the other side of the tunnel. You'll take the bar, you'll pass, you'll find a great opportunity. You'll say yes to opportunities. I think the more you say yes to things and you go out on a limb and you take risks, and you kind of create your own path and definition for success, that's kind of where your career will lead. And there's no linear path. Like I couldn't have imagined where I am now 6 years ago. I just could not have. But I did say yes to things that excited me. I did say yes to things that scared me. And I think if you just have that mindset, I think you'll find yourself in a really good place after graduation and beyond.
+1 to everything that Pamela said. Yes, absolutely. I love the idea of defining your own success. That I wish somebody had told me that. I guess what I would add is cultivate your own garden. You are responsible for your happiness, and nobody else can tell you like what that means for you. And so as you go along, if you find yourself drawn to a certain practice area or something, don't tell yourself you shouldn't do it just because, it doesn't make the most money or whatever it is. Just do the things you like. You're going to be more successful at doing things that you like versus trying to force yourself into something that you don't like. That's just not a recipe for success. And on the cultivating your own garden piece, you all are sitting here, you're active participants in this organization. And so continue being active and gravitating towards people who are also invested in your success. It makes it easier. It also, it just helps you feel less alone. This career is kind of cutthroat at times. I'm sure you've heard that. It can be a little harsh out here. There's a lot of times when it feels really lonely, or you might be the only in the room. And so don't let your networks die. Like keep your network strong. Like I said, I'm here because LeVale reached out and brought me here. And so, and that's just a testament to how amazing he is, but also to forming those like genuine connections with other people in the industry.
Priya, LeVale, Juliette, feel free to add anything else you want to share with our students.
I mean, I'd add it to, everything Pamela and Akasha mentioned. And I'd only, also say that, it was difficult. It's often difficult transitioning from being a student to being a professional, and having to understand that, you know, you can ask, like, there really are no such things as dumb questions. You can ask, and that just shows how inquisitive your nature is. And I think, at least in my experience, the more inquisitive and curious you are about asking those questions that may seem dumb, the more you learn and understand. And ultimately, my goal with, like, every position that I take is really to, like, expand my knowledge professionally, and to better prepare myself for whatever is next. I might not know what's next, but it all kind of comes together just the way it's intended to. And so I think that's just really critical. Like, don't be too hard on yourself, and understand that that may not look like someone else's, and that's completely okay.
I think to add on to, when I was in college, and worked for the courts, the judge that I worked for always said, like, don't lose sight of yourself, because I think, especially going back to litigation, right? Like, people, especially I think, minority women have this pressure of, like, how they present, how they appear, what they wear, right? How they speak. And it's very easy to sometimes adopt a different personality for when you kind of are at work, and when you're not. And he was really concerned with me kind of losing sight of who I was, because of the jobs and the roles that I'd taken and the pressure that I put on myself. And so, I always try to kind of, with whatever meeting or whatever job that I have, I always try to really be true to who I am and to be genuine. And I think that has really helped me cultivate a lot of really positive relationships with colleagues, because it is a hard field, and everyone who's on the phone today from Intuit is definitely someone I've reached out to in a time of need and have a great working relationship with. And, I think it's really that, like, that connection that you build through being yourself and really opening up to kind of your colleagues, and they become your friends, and then you have this awesome support network that really elevates you.
And all that I would add is just that, a professor once told me, he said, just always keep in mind, and I'll share this, you all may have heard this already, but just keep in mind that it's the practice of law, meaning that it's a journey. You're going to continue to practice, and you're going to continue to figure out things, and you can always figure out things so long as you are relying on your network and asking questions and continuing to be curious and being a self-starter. I think Pamela mentioned that earlier. So going out and seeking out knowledge and piecing things together, that's what it is, right? And that's no different than practicing any other craft or hobby. You just have to continue to work at it and know that there is no linear path. There's no one right way to do any of this. And so you just got to keep at it and keep grinding, and make sure that you, again, rely on close loved ones and your network, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's another thing that I used to struggle with, is, like, not wanting to ask for help or seem like, I'm dumb because I'm asking for help or something along those lines. Like, don't do that to yourself. Asking for help is one of the best things that you can do, and it gets you a lot further if you set those kind of insecurities aside, and just rely on the folks that actually love you and want to see you succeed.
LeVale, Pamela, Akasha, Juliette, Priya, I can't thank you enough for being here with us and sharing your wisdom and your experience with our students. Thank you to Intuit for being a great partner. I look forward to seeing this partnership take off. To our students, thank you for being with us as always, as we wrap up a full year of what was great programming and great opportunities. I hope everyone stays well, students powered through these finals, and hopefully you can enjoy a bit of your summer. To our panelists, to you and your family, please stay safe, stay well. And again, thank you all for being with us, and have a good night/afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.